I'm Anthony Rucker. I'm a principal technical specialist with Microsoft, focused on supply chain. Old Apex guy, so when it comes to demand forecasting and master planning, been doing it a lot of years. And then supply planning is more around what would be traditional master planning or MRP, netting out those gross requirements into an execution plan. So you guys have saw a lot of supply chain today, and watching the end of James's session there, a lot in procurement and warehousing as well. So full supply chain management capabilities and dynamics. Our focus for this session is really going to be mostly on demand planning, but I want to share some supply planning too. So to try to cover both in a short time, because each one of these sections could easily be an hour by themselves. But starting with forecasting, we've got a visual forecast designer. We're using AI-based algorithms, or really what people have been doing this for a long time would say is regression algorithms that are using machine learning algorithms like ARIMA, exponential smoothing, seasonality index, and we also leverage profit. You can collaborate with your forecast. So once you've kind of generated your forecast based on your historic sales data or historic usage data, then you can collaborate with folks in the organization. There's folks that want to make some changes or edits to the forecast, they can do that, put in their reasoning and comments. If you provide new products, we can phase in and phase out products as they come new into the market and things that might be coming obsolete over time. And then once we get that forecast, then we want to drop in to the supply planning capability, traditional master planning or MRP. So here I'm looking at coverages and minimum and maximums for products, maybe capacity if we're talking about manufacturing activity. We also have the capability to do demand-driven MRP, which really is structured around the average daily usage of a product and helps calculate your mins, max, and reorder points, and then priority-based planning too. Because some situations I may only have so much of product and it's got to go to maybe multiple distribution centers or warehouses, and then I want to determine who should get that product based on their inventory position. And then the execution, which you've seen a bit of that already today, so we won't jump into that, but that is really that full planning and execution cycle using Dynamics. This gets a little bit more detail. So what we do with demand planning is we import historical data. We're using our data management framework to bring data in to the forecasting tool. And then in the forecasting tool, I can do transformations, things like maybe putting it into time buckets if you forecast weekly or monthly or whatever it might be. Also, then creating a forecast, so generating and going through the different algorithms are going to give me the best fit forecast, review that with people, get consensus, and when we're all happy, that comes into master planning for us to execute our master planning capability, and then that gets us to our planned purchase orders, transfer orders, production orders, whatever it is that we're working with from an execution standpoint. So just a few things before we get in it. We'll see all this in the software, but interactive statistical forecasting. So the ability to use different models, as I mentioned, ARIMA, seasonality, exponential smoothing, and profit. Being able to pick and choose from those algorithms. So if you know that your historic demand pattern best fits, ARIMA or ETS, then you can select that forecast model. Or what I do often is select best fit, because best fit really is going to run through every one of those models and then yield me a forecast suggestion that gives me the least amount of mean absolute percentage error. We used to call it MAD, mean absolute deviation, but the idea is based on that historical data, project what I'm going to sell or use into the future and give me the best projection possible, so eliminating the amount of percentage error. We can also allow you to remove any outliers. So if you have anomalies in your data, your historic sales or historic usage, and you know that that's not going to be something that happens every year, then we give you a couple different methods to be able to remove those outliers. And then again, I mentioned phase in and phase out features for new product introductions and that kind of thing. Being able to segment it, you'll see when we get into the software that I have a lot of different dimensions I've brought in from the history data, the customer group, the sales segment, the actual customer, the product family, the product grouping, the warehouse, the site, the legal entity, all the different dimensions that you might want to aggregate and disaggregate on. And why that's good is because if I have certain people I want to share the forecast with, let's say a seller who's in a certain region or a certain sales segment, then I can give him access to just that segment. So then he can provide his input for the forecast that, might be a little bit different than the machine learning algorithm generated through the forecasting time series. Then I can collaborate with it. I've got version history, comments. If I share it with folks and they want to make changes to certain periods or certain totals, they can put comments in there of why they think that it's going to be less or it's going to get more, be more. So as the forecast planner, I can come back and see those changes and see what their justification and reason is for those changes. And I also have version history because I may run my forecast multiple times based on edits and input from different people. So finally, I'm at that consensus forecast and I'm ready to approve it and go right into the planning stage. Also, I can bring data out of the box. We bring data directly from your historical data and your products from Dynamics supply chain capability. But I can also bring data in from a CSV, from an Excel system, from external systems. Maybe I have a large customer forecast that I want to bring in and merge with my historic data. So a lot of flexibility in it, being able to bring in that data. And all the insights and analytics are right in the demand planning application from a forecast standpoint, including Copilot features that can help me understand key data insights, analyze the information, look at detail that may have changed from previous year or the previous period to the current period. So it helps me evaluate the quality and the reasoning behind that data. And the analytics, you guys have probably heard about Power BI today. And we give you a lot of Power BI reports out of the system or out of the box that can provide a lot of KPIs and metrics. One of the things nice about the demand planning application, the forecasting tool, is all those insights and analytics are built directly into the tool. And very scalable, composable, extensible, all those things as a Microsoft solution as well. Okay, let's get into the software. Okay, I'm sure you've seen this throughout the day when folks sign on to this system. We have a dashboard, and based on my roles and responsibilities, it allows me to access either workspaces or places in the system or in the module that I may want to go to do my job and do my work. I can see a lot here because I'm signed on with Julia, and she has access to a lot of data. And I can see my demand planning application, which is our forecasting tool, is an application. When I click on that forecasting tile, it opens up my forecasting capability. Nice little overview here for people to learn and understand how the forecasting works. But one of the first things I'm going to do is do that import because I want to bring that data in. And as I mentioned before, that import is out of the box with the dynamic supply chain. And again, if I want to bring additional third-party products or information or detail in, I can do that as well as part of that data import. So looking at historical data, I'm going to do an import and we'll just look at an example of one of these imports we have here of historic data. And this is just me bringing it in. I have my connection URL, which is my supply chain environment, brings in that data. I can put it on a run schedule. So I like cadences when we talk about forecasting. I bring in my data on a regular basis. I might do the transformation, some calculations, and then I run my forecast, and then I export it on a regular basis. So kind of having a consistent cadence, if you will. And then I can see where I've brought it in just a couple days ago. I brought in my data from Dynamics, all my historical information around just distinct products, historical sales, legal entities, the planning information, all that import comes in, and now it resides in my tables and data. And if I look at that just to verify that that data is real, I can come in there and see what that data looks like. So it shows my legal entity, the actual delivery date, the order that was done, the product that it was performed against, who the buyer was, which would be the customer, the buyer ID, and the actual warehouse or distribution and quantity that was shipped to the customer. I can control this data with the import and export profiles. So if there's more information and data I want, this is just an example of what's provided out of the box. So when I look at products, I might want to bring in product name, product type, product group, product family, and all these dimensions allow me to aggregate and disaggregate my forecast, whether it's by customer group, site or region, specific product, product group or family. I can, once I run my forecast, then I can kind of slice and dice, if you will, on all those different dimensions to look at. Maybe I just want to look at one specific distribution center or warehouse, or maybe I want to look across multiple stores, or maybe I want to look at just one sales segment for a particular customer. So all that table and data comes in here, resides in demand planning, including pricing data. So if I want to bring in pricing data because a forecast is also a revenue plan. So it's a financial plan. So if I want to bring in costs like this example of worst case cost, worst case sales price, then I can bring in that additional baseline cost or baseline sales price. And now when I generate a forecast, I can look and see not only what it is in units, but also what it represents in revenue or dollars. Once I've brought that forecast data in, the next thing I might want to do, since it's all daily time stamped, I might want to actually go ahead and do what we call a transformation, which is basically just kind of bringing that data into time buckets. Now, I might also want to do other things like identify certain data columns, shift dates if I want to, but this is really bringing in my historical data that I'm going to work with. So if we go ahead and just select one of these, we'll just take I was going to select the one I did most recently. Maybe it's this forecast in September. Uh, Here I can show that I want to take that demand data, which was date and time stamped, and I want to put it in to monthly buckets. If I have decimal products, I may want to put precision around it. If I want to see decimal points, I'd put this precision at 1, so everything rounds to a whole number. I can see all the columns that I've brought in and data and information from the import. So what I'm going to transform is things like delivery date, actual quantity, product ID, customer group, sales segment. And again, this is the out of the box choice. You can add or take away from those if it makes more sense for your organization. Got a run schedule too, so I can import, transform data all on a regular cadence and schedule. And then once I got that transformation, I get my first time series. And this is my historical data time series. So if I look at this, and bear with me because this is my demo data, so I have a lot of zeros. So I have a lot of data going back all the way to 2015 that has some data, doesn't have a lot of data. I'll give you some better examples before, but because my demo data is kind of a little bit messy, I have a lot of zeros and gaps. Now, what that means too is if I run a forecast against this, I'm going to get a lot of gaps in my forecast because I have gaps in my historic data. You can determine if you want 3 years data, 5 years data. You can put time fences on that data. So if you want to say, hey, put the most emphasis on the last 12 months, because that's probably more what the next 12 months is going to look like, you can set those time fences as well. So now that I've got that data transformed, and again, I can do different transformations. You can see a couple example here where I've merged, a couple of multiple forecasts together and blended that data. I also get this option to be able to run calculations. So basically Dynamics is giving you is an opportunity to manipulate your historic demand. So if there's missed sales data, again, anomalies that I might take out with an outlier tool, it allows me to go back and look at that historic data and clean it up a little bit if I need to before I run a forecast profile. I can also combine two course forecasts like I mentioned, or I can get a result that's the average of two. It doesn't have to be combined. It can be merged and be an average. I can run additional calculations against it. I can say I want to increase my historic data by 10% because when I run the forecast, I'm expecting 10% growth next year. You can also do that at the forecast profile level. So these jobs like the import activity, the transformation, and the different calculations you might want to do on your historic data, these are generally set up by your administrator, whoever's leading the forecast team that understands your business. And for the most part, those are just running on a regular schedule. And then it's up to the forecast planner to decide when he's going to generate his forecast. And you can even put this on a repetitive schedule if you want as well. The last one I think I ran was a forecast in November, so I can see my forecast profile here. When I run my forecast profile, I get to not only have my horizon and time buckets, it's going to be monthly, it's going to go for 12 months. I also get to select my model. So here's where I'm really selecting the regression algorithms to do this, but also to remove any outliers. So you can see here I've got these action cards that says take this time series input from your historic data, go in and first let's remove some outliers. So I can use the interquartile range, or I can also use lows, which is a seasonal and trend decomposition method for removing outliers. I can set the rules around what I consider to be an outlier, so that brings that out of the calculation for the new forecast. And then I can actually go in and say what kind of forecast I want. Do I want to pick one of these models like ARIMA, ETS, or Profit? Or do I want to say, hey, Dynamics, go through all these models and find me one that gives me the best fit? And what that kind of means, if we look at this forecast profile, believe we can go right here to jobs and look at this profile, and it's going to give me my model, how long the forecast run took. It's going to show the model that I used, which is removing the outliers and best fit. And then it's going to give me explainability. And what explainability is it's telling me for this particular product, I used ARIMA because I found the least amount of MAPE. Now, as I mentioned before, my data is kind of spotty and not great. So my MAPE is pretty high. For the most part, you're probably going to most of the time be looking at anywhere from 5 to 10, depending on how good your accuracy is on your forecast and how much movement you get in your demand. But it actually gives you the justification of why it picked that model and what the mean absolute percentage error is going to be. So if I come back now and I look at this generated forecast, and let's see, I want to make sure I picked the right one. Let's go with this one. So now I get a worksheet of the forecast. This is combining all units. So I'm looking at all the units in my forecast. I can see a timeline starting in December, what my forecast is. You can also see I've got this little Copilot feature that pops up here. So if I want to use Copilot to give me some information about shifts from a certain period to another period, maybe from a year to another year, any trends that I might want to see, any outliers. So I can come in here and say, hey, give me some insights, Copilot, and tell me what you're seeing. What's the shift from March to April? And it'll go in and analyze that data and tell me, okay, well, these products increased by 50% or 50 units, 417%, and also any top declines. And it'll show me some insights about that forecast that I've just generated and any shifts or trends that I might have in the data. If I look down at my grid below, and by the way, I'm going to go ahead and just select a worksheet here because I can filter everything in a worksheet. I can come in here and say I only want to look at certain warehouses, which is what I've done here, or I only want to look at certain product groups or families or a certain customer group or sales segment. So again, this gives me that ability to filter so that when I go down to this grid below, then I've got a grid that makes some sense to me and can focus what I want to look at. Now I can also group this, which I've done. I've grouped it by just the product and warehouse location ID. If I wanted to bring other things in there, like a customer group, I don't know if I have customer groups, might have some blanks here, but I can bring in the different, there's some customer groups that these products are tied to. So again, I can aggregate and disaggregate by these different filters and the different group capability. I can even filter on the totals. So if I only want to see products that are over 50 units or high volume products, then I have the ability to do that as well. Thought I took out that customer. I guess I didn't hit supply or apply. Now I took out product number 2. Let me get this right on this time. Warehouse and product ID. So now that I got a forecast here, I can again share this forecast with folks, and it's generating out what my sales that I'm expecting based on my historic data, time series that I used. And I can go ahead and make edits to this data if I want to. If I were to make an edit, let's say a total. So instead of 24, I believe we're going to double that projection. If I hit 48, it's going to automatically spread based on my historical demand pattern what that quantity would be if I sold a total of 48 over the next 12 months. I can also go in and just change an individual cell. So maybe I'm thinking in February, I'm going to, and let me just fit that to data. In February, I think I'm going to, I had some zeros there, but what I really think is I'm going to sell 200 units. So I can go ahead and put that in there. And I can also generate a comment. So maybe I want to give a comment of why I did that. And you can see I've played with this one. So I've had different demand starting early, unexpected campaign. So folks that you collaborate with this forecast, they may want to make changes to it and they can record their comments. And then when the forecast planner sees that, he has some justification of why Anthony in this example made these changes here. And I also got version history as I showed in the deck. So any changes and edits that I've made to this, change cell values, I can see what those changes are as well. Also, notice on this grid, so right now I've got this one line. If I unclick that line, I see what that time pattern or timeline looks like. If I look at a specific item on the grid, it changes and shows me what that timeline looks like specifically for that item. So if I looked across product family, it would show me that product family's timeline. So a lot of capabilities to manipulate some of this data once I get a profile. And when I look at the different profiles that I have here, as I run forecast profiles, I'm going to have them in my forecast set. So I get to define the category. Is this demand data that I manipulated? Is this something I did for a financial projection? Or is this a forecast that I'm working on? And then I can go into that forecast and do some activity. So in this particular forecast, just to give you some examples, maybe I want to do the comparison to last year's historic data. So in this example here, this forecast is really saying, here's what my profit demo said or forecast demo said that the quantities would be, and the green line represents what last year's data was. So it allows me to go back and look to say, how close did my forecast line up, with last year's historical sales? I can also do comparisons against the different models. So if I want to run it, maybe I want to run separate models, one for profit, one for ARIMA, and then compare those to my historic data. I can see which model best fit that historic data. And looks like it was probably ARIMA lines up best with that historic data. Maybe a little bit peaks here, but again, I can use Copilot to get some insights on that as well to explain to me what caused those chips and why that is. The other thing I can do with these worksheets, once I've started building into these worksheets, is maybe do forecast and revenue. So show me what my forecast is, but also express it in the baseline sales price or the worst case sales price. So now in my grid, I'm not only seeing the quantity or the unit that I produce, but I'm seeing what that is in a baseline sales price. So that's allowing me to see what I can expect from a revenue standpoint based on this forecast. I can also look at last month. So every month when I run a forecast, I want to look and say, well, how good do we do last month on our forecast? Is that what we really actually sold or not? I want to be able to see that trending, because if I'm underselling my forecast or I'm overselling it, I may want to make some adjustments to that forecast. Let's see, what else? I think I wanted to show, let's look at one of these that's got some in these comparisons, the way we do it is once we've run these different time series. So in this example, I've used my historical demand time series and I've run my profit and I want to compare the two. I can simply just go in here and say add data and pick the two models I want to compare. This example, I picked my profit demo and I picked my historical data. So I want to bring that data again and compare those particular pieces of work. So I can see here I've got all my copies or information in detail of, either production capacity, if I'm looking at something like demonstrated capacity, the different forecast versions. Maybe I've did some what if capability and I want to look at it from a financial projection and, working with the different data and information until I've finally got a forecast that I want to approve. I can do this same kind of thing down here on the grid. So if I want to add some data to this grid, I can actually customize the grid format. So if I want to come in here and say, let's add a rule, anything that's, let's say greater than 50, I want to highlight that, so that I'm noticing it. Maybe I want to put an icon on here, so I have some visibility into what that looks like. And so what that's going to do is that's just going to change my grid a little bit, like we saw in the PowerPoint slide deck, to allow me to be able to look at those totals in detail. Now, for me, this grid's not as heavy as I'd like it to be, so I can download it to a CSV, or we give you a pop-out screen that brings that information into more a larger screen so that you can work with that data, and you can resize these columns if you want to move the information around a little bit. And then again, if I choose to edit, I can click my edit button, go through my edits, save my changes, and put any comments if I need to. Okay, so now once I get to a forecast that I'm happy with, and you can see I've run quite a few different forecasts over here, maybe some what if examples, different ones on different time series. Maybe I ran a best fit, but at some point in time when I'm happy with that forecast, I'm going to go ahead and export it. And when I export that forecast, I'm going to be exporting it back to Dynamics because I brought this data in the tool, I've manipulated the data, brought in external data, and now I'm going to go ahead and move this back into Dynamics. You can see the URL. There is a little bit of rules that I might want to define because one of the key things that I want to define when I come back in is what my forecast model ID is, and that's going to show up in Dynamics. So if I come over and I look at master planning, for instance. So I'm starting to transition into taking this forecast to a master plan, and I go look at master plan, and I'm going to run my dynamic plan. Well, if I look at that plan, what model am I using from the forecast? I'm using the 202 model. And the reason that's important is, again, maybe I run multiple forecasts, what if scenarios, capabilities. So 202 is going to be the one that I use for production and material planning. So I bring that and identify it into my forecast model. So all that data that comes back in from the forecast model moves right into what we call demand forecast lines. So if I just do a quick search on demand forecast lines, it's going to bring it up. And then if I look at that forecast model, which was my 202 model, because I've run a couple of different forecasts here, and we just go ahead and apply that. Now it's showing all my forecast information that's brought into Dynamics, and now I'm ready to execute master planning on these. As I mentioned, master planning here, this is a workspace. I can't show you the full module as well. Uh, shows the demand-driven MRP we'll talk about quickly. I know I'm only got about 15, 20 minutes, but the demand forecast lines, some of the forecasting capabilities, some inquiries and reports that I can go in and look at, all my setup information. And one of the key things when I do a forecast or a master plan is going to be my coverage. How do I want to cover that item? So if I come back over here and I look at my demand plan, and we'll go back to that real quick. In my master plan, what am I including in it? Transfer orders, purchase orders, sales orders, anything that might be required for production, like job scheduling or operation scheduling. If I want to, I can include quotes here and requisitions. If I have batch items or lot items, I make sure I include the shelf life dates. I also have reduction keys. How am I going to reduce the forecast? So how does new orders into the system consume the forecast? So I get a couple different options of how I can consume that forecast throughout the period. I also get time fences that I can put around the master plan. How far do I want this master plan to go out? This is a dynamic plan. It's a short-term plan. So I might want to do it for 3 months or 6 weeks, depending on how volatile your movement is in the dynamic state. And then I may have another static plan that goes out 12 months or 18 months. And that's really helped me secure, my raw materials that might have long lead times. So I can set up a lot of time fences here and sequencing data and explosion. How often do I want to explode a bundle or a bomb as I'm doing this? Any calculated delays. So if I run master planning and for some reason, because of lead times or an issue with quality or a late shipment, if I'm going to get a delay, it'll calculate those delays for me. And I do have a slide deck that explains all these in more detail that I'm happy to share with you. I put this together because some of this is kind of hard to really get to, just like the algorithm data. I've got a slide deck here on algorithm data that explains how the algorithms work for outlier removals, when the best fit is to use which method. Same way with the demand forecasting stuff. So I have a lot of additional documents I can share with you that may explain some of this since I'm going really quick. Safety margin in days, this is really, hey, it takes time to receive a product, takes time to issue a product, takes time to generate a reorder. I want to include that in my consolidated lead time for that product or activity so I don't get noise in my forecast and have a ton of outages. I can enter company plan, multi-site plan. So if I have different divisions or companies that provide maybe a sub-assembly or a part that's used in another division, then I can plan across those multi-sites as well. In the workspace, we kind of make it easy for you. We give you some quick access tiles like going to the planned orders that were generated from an MRP run. You can see I ran it here today. It shows the calculated days. Any action messages, do I need to increase it, expedite it, decrease it, push it out? What do I need to do based on things that happen, like late PO, down machine, sales order I wasn't expecting, all that stuff that just happens in the supply chain that I need to stay on top of and respond to. The grid here in the middle of the workspace gives me a nice look at what's urgent. So I can see any planned orders from the ERP run that is urgent that I need to get placed quickly. I also have the ability to set planning priorities on it. So I think I have an item I set with a planning priority, which is based on your coverage code, this item here, and it has a planning priority on it. So I can sort this grid by planning priority. I can sort all my planned orders by planning priority so that planners are focused on what's most important, for the company or the distribution center or production, whatever it may be. I can see, planned orders that are important that I need to get placed quickly because they could be delaying sales, or maybe they're delaying a forecast or delaying safety stock. So this Workspace grid gives me some ability just to work here. I can actually go ahead and firm directly out of this workspace or make modifications. So if I look at an order and say, hey, I'm going to make a modification on maybe the delivery date because I looked in at pegging and seen, from a pegging standpoint, based on the net requirements and what's on hand, I think I want to make this adjustment to that planned order, or I can simply just firm the planned order as it came out of MRP. This is a look at all those planned orders that I have. One of the nice features is if I go into here as a buyer or a production planner, or material planner, I'm not needing to see everything. So what I can do is set up certain views for certain users. So if I'm a user that works with let's say I'm a production planner. I only want to see my production orders. And maybe it's based on a certain machine or resource or production line. I can filter it down so I only see what I need to respond to. If I'm a buyer, in a certain region, maybe I want to look at just what the Southwest region activity is, because that's all that I'm concerned with. So I can use these different versions or views with different roles. So based on the user, I can have that default. So when they come in and look at planned orders, if I'm, buyer group 22, they're just going to see those planned orders that are specifically for that group or for that site or for that warehouse. Can really filter on anything to be able to segregate that down so their work is focused on what areas they manage. So listen, I always have notes, but I have not looked at my notes once because I knew we were kind of wanting to move fast based on timing and hitting both these topics. Uh, let's see, I can't just run master planning on individual items. I get what's called a runtime filter. So let's say I have a delay with a particular item or a quality issue, and now I'm having to quarantine a bunch of items, and now I don't know what the impact's going to be on my customers and on my production schedule. Then I can come in here and just rerun master planning now for that particular product. Or if I have a down machine and now resources impacted, I could run master planning just on that specific resource, or warehouse, or site, or product group, any of the criteria that I might find in this item table that I want to go in and just run on that particular item. And since we are using planning optimization as well, planning optimization is really one of the coolest things I've seen done to master planning in MRP in years. But so now the way we do master planning is planning optimization. We take the information and the data and we use a cloud service to run it called planning optimization. So now I can run it during office hours. So it's faster, it's quicker, and because it's running on the cloud service, it's not degrading the performance for your users that are operating and doing their job during the day. So no longer do I have to wait till overnight or to the weekend to find what those updates are. Now I can run this more frequently, which to me was awesome. Because in the old days when we would run it on the weekends, well, by Tuesday the data was stale, and I didn't know what I was working with. And so being able to run it daily, multiple times daily, is awesome. So there's a couple of things that I didn't cover that I want to hit because they're real important when it comes to planning. And really, first one is going to be coverage items or coverage groups. So typical stuff you would hear being a planner, you probably kind of know things like period requirements. I'm going to group everything that's needed for a period and create one planned purchase order or production order to be able to support that. Or every time I get an order, I'm going to create, a production order to produce it or whatever it might be. So that standard stuff is there where we can just go ahead and say, hey, I'm going to do it on a period or even do it on a min max. So when I get down to my minimum, I'm going to generate, a planned order to bring me back to my max. Pretty basic, simple stuff. It may be good enough for most people, but I also get this concept of demand-driven MRP, where everything is really driving off my average daily usage. And it will look at average daily usage, not only in the past, but in the future as well. So if I forecast in the future demand for some certain item that requires a raw material or a finished good, it's going to consider that future, I'll get it in a minute, future forecast as well as past historical data, and it's going to calculate an average daily usage. And as that usage fluctuates and that demand and projections fluctuate, it's going to say, here's what your minimum should be, here's what your maximum should be, and here's what your reorder point should be. So this is also because I can run planning optimization or planning every day, I can run this every day and get my daily usage. I can also do couple that with priorities to be able to set priorities against the item. So if we go and look at something like, I'll go just to this released item real quick. I'm almost there. I would love to show you more, but hopefully this is resonating with you guys. So if I look at this item here, I'm sure you guys sell a lot of cocoa powder. If I go ahead and pull that one up, one of the things I want to look at here under planning is item coverage. Now, my item coverage, I've got different rules for different warehouses. So in warehouse 51, I use auto min max, and I've got my minimum maximum. Get down to 100, generate me an order to bring me back up to 200. I also have one that's grouping, so it's on a period base. It's looking at certain periods in time and saying, okay, group all the demand you have for this item and make me one big purchase order or one big production order for the period you've defined. 10 days, 20 days, 30 days, whatever it may be. I also have a warehouse for this item that's using the demand-driven capability. And if I go up and look at demand-driven capability, what it's doing is it's buffering the values over time. It's using the average daily usage, like was defined in the coverage group. And with this, I get buffer values. So now I'm able to look and see, based on average daily usage, I may have different minimums, maximums, and reorder point. So if I'm increasing in my sales, you can notice how suddenly my reorder point ups, my min ups, and so does my max because I increased in sales during that period. If I'm decreasing, I'll get the decrease as well. There's the lead time factor, variability factor, a couple things there that kind of help you be able to calculate that daily usage and those mins max based on variability. Because let's face it, not every vendor that says I can get it to you in 3 days gets it to you in 3 days. Sometimes it's 4 days, sometimes it's 5 days, sometimes it's one day. So based on that variability of the lead time, it might adjust what my min or max or reorder point should be to be able to cover that demand. I don't know why my graph's a little small down here, but I should be able to see what's on my, see if I just hit refresh there. Or let me pick one more. Let me pick another item that it shows me basically what that position of the product is. So if I take, pretty sure this one I've set up and used a few times. The data may be a little old, but what I really want to show you is how you see kind of the activity that's going on in those buffers. So it shows me here, and it's pushing it all back because it's history or it's back in time data here. But it shows me the on hand, what's between minimum and reorder, and what's between reorder and max. So it's showing me that buffer and also giving me some information around it. That's a little bit better look at the buffer zones here when we see them in the different colors. But it's telling me, on the different periods here. It looks like this one's weekly for some of these periods. Was I critically low? Was I higher than average? So the reason this becomes important is because I can use this to be able to, let's see, I think I've got it in this deck here. I can use this in master planning to manage that activity. So the average daily usage, how I calculate it. Now I can start looking at things in zones. If it's below minimum, it's in the red zone. If it's between minimum and reorder, it's in the yellow zone. So now I can actually use that to create some rules. So in each zone, what am I looking at from average daily usage times the order cycle, so demand during lead time, if you will. It's looking at those different calculations for each buffer zone, and it's telling me what my minimum, what my reorder point, and what my maximum should be. So it's calculating for me, but it's also notifying me when I'm in the red zone or I'm in the yellow zone when activity needs to be done. And that's where priority planning comes in. Sorry to go so fast and move so quickly, but now that I've set up my buffers, set up my zones, I'm using DDMRP to calculate what my projected on hand should be for min, max, and reorder point. Now, when I look at it, since I know my average daily usage, I can say, well, I know what a planning priority would be for my projected on hand if it's sitting here in the yellow zone. So now I can set priorities to say, if this warehouse needs this product, they need it maybe more than another warehouse might need it in this example, just because of what their projected on hand is and where their current inventory position is. So DDMRP and priority planning are all about helping you manage that buffer inventory that you need and maximizing that to the average daily usage, to the projected forecast and usage going forward, and looking at history going back. And it can help you determine what should I transfer to each warehouse from the distribution center to support their needs, or how should I dole out the purchase order that I have coming in to maybe different DCs? Because I may only have a certain amount of items coming in, and I need to make sure I put them into the warehouses that need them the most. And it'll also actually split those quantities out. This feature here is something that I wish I had when I worked in operations, because if I only had a certain amount of products, like 1,500, and I had three different warehouses or distribution centers asking for that, I got 1,500. How much do I give? This one's asking for 900. They're asking for 1050. He's asking 1250. I can't meet that. In the old days, I would just split it 500, 500, 500 and hope for the best and do a transfer order if one of them used it before the other one. But with this priority grouping and these zones and being able to project my inventory on hand, I can get the system to automatically split that and optimize that split and say, well, based on where each one of these warehouses sit, it would be best to give this one 400, this one 450, this one 650, based on where they're at in the zone and what their projected on hand is going to look like when that order comes in. So I know that's fast and I know that's quick. I'm happy to share this deck so you can dig into it. If you guys are not familiar with DDMRP, it's been around for about, over 10 years now. It's a great advancement to standard ERP instead of just doing the, you know, period by period or groupings or min max. This gives you a little bit better control over how you want to manage your inventory. Now, we do safety stock calculations in the system to generate safety stock based on usage and demand during lead time and issues, and forecast error can be concluded in that. But what I love about the demand-driven MRP, along with the priority planning, it's a little bit more focused. It's great for maintaining levels of inventory in certain warehouses or raw materials for production. So if I need certain raw materials and I don't want to wait 90 days or 60 days, what should I carry? How much should I carry based on ADU, based on future projections, and based on history?